Hi, Damian Jones.
Hey Veronica, how are you doing today?
Oh, I had you in two places, so that's better.
Oh, it just, hang on.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine, but my music just started playing, so I
I
gotta.
saw here. Okay, folks, welcome to the shade-free zone. While Damian figures out his phone because it's playing music now, I just want to invite you to the topic today, which is cancel culture. Specifically talking about Me Too, hashtag Me Too. I was all over that. I've had so many hashtag Me Too moments. It's not funny. And really wanting to find our way forward so that when any of us, regardless of our gender, perpetrates, does something that harms another human being, that we don't have to immediately banish people, and cancel them in our world. That we find ways, maybe towards restorative justice, transformative justice, making amends. There's so many things that we can explore around this that lead to healing and a coming together. So my guest today is Damian Jones, and Damian has been with me before. We did an interview about a month ago. Damian, does that sound right to you? Yeah. And can you? The volume's just a little bit low. Maybe hold your phone closer or turn the volume up.
I can't. I don't think I can turn it up on my end.
Okay. So, well, do you have earbuds? Maybe. You look great, but we can't hear you.
I do. I don't. They're generally not that much louder. But let me hang on one sec. Let me try.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry for the technical difficulties here. Let me just tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a sexologist and a relationship coach. A lot of you probably already know that. But I'm working on a book right now. It's called Love, Lust, and Romance in the Wake of Me Too. I'm also launching a webinar specifically for women, which is called Sensual and Safe. So I'm really taking a deep dive into consent as it applies to long-term relationships. Now, I just want to say a lot of people have assumptions that if you are in a long-term relationship, you've already given your consent. And that's not true. So in my practice, I work with a lot of couples, and I've noticed over and over again that particularly women identified persons in heterosexual relationships with male identified persons seem to fall into a pattern of what I would call kind of people pleasing or avoiding conflict, so that they're kind of literally enduring unwanted touch. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't actually want to have sex with this person. They just didn't want to have sex that way, or maybe that frequently. So I am on a mission to make sure that we don't endure unwanted touch, regardless of our gender, because it traumatizes our tissues and reduces our ability to have sexual pleasure, orgasms, when we want them and how we want them. So
Yeah, and has us feel less safe in our bodies, so that we can
oh,
experience what's going on in there.
exactly. Oh my God, we can hear you so much better now.
Oh yeah. Oh good. Okay, great.
Yeah. Yeah. So welcome, Damian Jones. Thank you so much for taking on this gnarly topic with me.
Thanks everyone. Thanks Veronica. And yeah, just for everyone, I'm phoning in from my van here. I'm in the middle of setting up for an art fair, so excuse the
Yes,
backdrop.
you're a sculptor.
I'm a sculptor. Yeah.
Yes, and also you have got a workshop that is coming out. Is it this weekend?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm leading a free webinar on Tuesday at 5 Pacific on how to generate joy and how to really come back in our bodies authentically and just experience the natural joy that's inherent in our bodies, the kind of joy that children have. And my backstory, I am a perpetrator. I made a very big mistake about 5 years ago after getting hooked on cocaine for a week. And fortunately, the woman involved was, had very good care and didn't have, much trauma afterwards. But I have been on a massive healing binge because of that since then.
Yeah, and we should just say that as far as the care, it was a community that was engaging in consensual sexual practices in a kind of a group setting. And in this particular instance, she fell asleep and you continued to have sex with her while she was sleeping, kind of
I did.
with a fruitless hope of waking her up, apparently. Would you say that's a
Yeah.
good characterization?
Well, I was because of the cocaine. I don't know what, I can't even say what my mental like rationalization for it was.
Okay,
Uh,
fair enough.
like and I've never touched that substance again and never will. I see it as like it's like Novocaine for the soul, kind of numbs your anxiety and fear, which is why people make feel so good, but it also numbs like empathy.
Yes,
So yeah,
yes, it does.
mhm,
Yeah, Damian, I was hooked on cocaine for 2 years when
mm,
from age 23 to 25. I got sober
mhm,
when I was 25.
mm,
And absolutely, it numbs you to a lot of things. Literally,
mhm.
too, if you rub it on your gums.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I I have perpetration and victimization in my history as well. I'm an incest survivor. I've been raped 3 times by well, first a guy in college, then a coworker, and then a serial rapist in Oakland. So I've got a long journey also as a domestic violence survivor, and I have perpetrated domestic violence, um, severe domestic violence against my male partner. I think that and I've often said I'm a perpetrator in recovery, and I'm also a survivor. One of the things that I'm really wanting to do is to start changing our language around this so that we start talking about the behaviors instead of the labels on people. I've,
Mm,
there's a lot of labels that I have worn over time: bisexual, sex worker, sexual rights activist. Um, but I think if we could start talking about harm and healing, you know,
mhm,
like what harm have we created? How do we heal it? That
mhm,
we could stop kind of adhering to some of the stereotypes that we have about who perpetrates even. So,
mhm,
Damien, when I was doing research for a particular chapter in my book, Love, Lust, and Romance in the Week of Me Too, I came across something that I had a suspicion existed, but didn't know that there was actual research on it. Turns out there is now a term that's it's a form of sexual assault, and it's called um, forced to penetrate. And this is because there is documentation of men who have been raped by women.
mm,
Now, it doesn't happen nearly as often as women getting raped by men. And of course, just to be clear, there are people that identify as female who may have penises, people who identify as male who have vulvas. So let's just be clear: a person who had a vulva raped a person who had a penis. And that's something that we don't talk about that in the culture. We don't talk about men being violated by female bodies, or male bodies being violated by female bodies. Do you
mhm.
have any thoughts about that, Damien?
Well, just in general, I don't really have, much personal experience of that
Yeah.
side of the picture, and we don't really hear very much about it, as you said, because, not many men would come forward and, and make a case on that.
Yeah.
Uh, the reverse, when it's, men raping women, is, I would say, far more common in our culture.
It is.
And but either way, it's a non-consensual sex, and like there's just so much shame wrapped up around our sexuality. There's like, we're all wounded to some degrees from, whatever happened to us growing up and, and through our lives, and from just the ancestral trauma that we were born into. Um, we're all just trying to give and receive love, but sometimes we have some really some warped ways of doing that, or understanding how to do that.
I was raised
Um,
in a home that
mhm,
had what I would term as kind of a mutual combat between my mother and my father. But, he always won. So it wasn't that my mom didn't also fight and hit or slap,
mhm,
but my father was bigger and stronger. And I
mhm,
think over time that at least the police departments have come to understand that when there's a domestic violence call, they might get assaulted by both people that are involved. And oftentimes both parties are arrested. But
mhm,
that's been a recent occurrence. In the 90s, the early 90s, when I was perpetrating domestic violence in my marriage, what had happened is that my husband perpetrated domestic violence against me, and I got a restraining order and threatened to file divorce if he didn't get help for his problem. It's very much looking at it as a male problem. And this, despite the fact that I had actually perpetrated domestic violence towards him years before when we had been doing drugs together. So now we were clean and sober, and we were shocked to find that domestic violence had followed us into sobriety. But he did get help. He went through a 6-month program. He never touched me out of anger again. But it seemed like there was some kind of Thelma and Louise part of me. For people who haven't seen that movie, Susan Sarandon. Um, it's a good flick. It's from the 90s. It was really popular at the time. A lot of women were running around wearing Thelma and Louise t-shirts. A lot of anger about kind of striking back and getting even. And I brought that into my marriage, and I continued to abuse him, even though he wasn't abusing me. I went all over the place trying to find help for that. And it was just so gendered that if I told a therapist or, in some kind of a support group about my problem, the reaction was that obviously I was just defending myself. And I was like, no, I'm perpetrating. I need help. So, Damian, this might blow your mind, but I actually went back to my husband and asked him to help me. And he did. He was kind of like my sponsor in recovery, and it was amazing. He taught me the things he'd learned in the class that I insisted that he take.
mm,
So I'm happy to say that even though we're divorced now, we both graduated from this domestic violence pattern, but we learned it from our parents. And
mhm,
I look at domestic violence now as kind of a family disease. And I don't look at it through a gendered lens. And I'm hoping that at some point we can start taking these conversations that way when it comes to sexual assault as well.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think about? I mean, you're a very brave man to admit to committing an act of rape publicly. Have you experienced any blowback? I know when I came out as a domestic violence perpetrator, the men's groups loved me, and I'm not sure I feel very good about that. But I also got hate mail. I'm just wondering how it is for you.
Well, it's been like a lot of different reactions from people. Yeah. Um, and uh, it's not, it's kind of, publicly known in the communities that I'm part of. And it's been, really challenging to relate in those communities because of that. And it has led to a couple of other women just getting really triggered by my actions, even though I didn't, um, cross any significant boundaries with them. But they
Mhm.
have gotten very upset with me, and made some allegations that aren't really accurate. So it's really kind of triggered people's, their fears, really, and their like lack of understanding of what to do with someone like me, someone who has admitted this. It's like, what do we do afterwards? How can we heal this? And what I've discovered through that is like that really the real healing comes in being able to understand the harm that we cause, and that, like, reaching through to, to really understand and grok in a way the suffering and pain that we cause from our actions. And that's what truly causes change to occur, when we really understand the results of our actions. And for example, like, we talk about kind of the patriarchal culture that kind of controls and dominates women. And I see that as just being generated by all of the little mistakes that men make, and that kind of create this pervasive culture of fear and control through through acts, through non-consensual acts, sexual acts, and violent acts as well. But generally, like, the men involved just see them as like one-off accidents. Like, that's what I used to like feel about, mistakes that I would make with women. But now I realize that it's like, it's just, one more bar in the patriarchal cage of oppression and control that women experience. And to my shame, I've put quite a few bars up in women's experiences, probably through the years.
Mm.
And but I'm really committed to working to remove them now, and to really liberate the feminine in all of us, and really to come back into our bodies and inhabit them. Mhm.
Let's talk about that part, because I know my journey around domestic violence with my husband was, he made a living amends to me and literal amends to me. And then
Mhm.
when I realized that I had a problem, I did so too. And actually, we got divorced about 16 years ago. I probably make amends to him for something almost every year. It's just part of my spiritual path. But a lot of people don't understand the difference between an amends and an apology. And I think you really pointed to what I consider an amends, which is the empathy. I think apologies are very self-centered. Oh, I feel so bad about what I did. Please forgive
Mhm.
me. It's all about me. But if I'm making amends to you, I'm saying, I've taken a thorough inventory of the damage that I've caused you. I see how profoundly wrong it was, and here's the steps that I'm taking to be a different person.
Mhm.
Would you agree with that? Is that your understanding of that amends process?
Yeah, and then there's apology, and then amends, and then also atonement, when to seek to really address any wrongs or harms that were caused.
How
So
might that look in the case of a rape? What would an atonement look like?
that's a great question. That's something I'm still working on. The woman I violated still doesn't, hasn't wanted to have any contact with me. And so to truly atone for those, um, whatever suffering I caused her,
Right.
hasn't, it hasn't really like come through yet.
Mm,
And like, but for myself, I am, looking to just to serve others, to help other people heal, and to atone in that way,
yeah.
for the wrongs I've, for harms that I've caused and suffering I've caused.
Yeah. When I was looking at the suffering that I've caused with my violence in the past, um,
Mhm.
I I think that I really saw how um, I'd hurt myself too. And just
Mhm.
like, when my husband and I were married, we had a dog. Uh, the dog witnessed our domestic violence. And I was just looking at pictures of him. He died several years ago, but I was looking at pictures of him, and just seeing the fear in his eyes of,
Mhm.
he still had that fear in his eyes even after the domestic violence was gone for several years. But I had taught him to fear me just by by doing what I did around him.
Mhm.
And of course, my energy was such that even if I didn't harm him, he still saw me as a threat. And I'm really happy to say that I have a beautiful relationship with the dog that I live with now. There isn't fear and there isn't trauma, but this legacy of, when we look at the mistakes that we've made, and for somebody who hasn't committed rape and hasn't committed domestic violence, there's almost all of us have made mistakes with our child rearing, if you have children. And of course, we make mistakes in other areas of our lives. But I think sometimes when we're judging other people, there's two things going on. One is a lack of healthy boundaries. Like, you don't know actually how to protect yourself from this dangerous person. And so judging them and maybe canceling them becomes your first line of defense. This is how we protect ourselves or protect our community. We get rid of that person. And then I also think there's some projection that takes place. It's just like when I told my husband, you either get help for your violence or I'm divorcing you. A lot of projection going on there. It was also a really healthy boundary. I have no regrets that I gave him that ultimatum, none whatsoever. But it set us on a path to discover that we both had a problem. And I think when we start seeing each other as victims and perpetrators, we don't get to the root of how we relate and how we can create safety in community and in relationship. What do you think about that, Damian?
Yeah, creating, that kind of safety is really key and important. Um, and we're growing to the point where communities are able to support the healing involved between, you know, victim and perpetrator, and to bring about, some true healing through that. Um, so
The community that you are in, even though the woman that you raped doesn't want to participate, the community that you were in actually had protocols for that, did it not?
not so much. I mean, there was a protocol created for this, which the original plan was we were going to have a restorative justice meeting after a year or two or so after I'd gone and done some healing. And that would have brought some completion to the whole thing. But she decided she, just wanted to move on with her life and not go through that. And she really didn't experience much trauma or suffering, to my knowledge, from that. So it was just, kind of dredging up the past for her. So
Okay,
there,
so that was she has every right to make that decision.
mhm.
But if she had decided to show up for the restorative justice, do you have some sense of what was in the works, what the plan was?
um, I don't know if I can speak to
Don't
that.
know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's interesting. I had a conversation with a colleague yesterday about restorative justice, and I've looked a little bit about the model, and it seems like it's been mostly applied towards juveniles in a very successful way, because the community comes in and supports the shift in behavior so that the young person feels supported by their community to become a better person. Even though you never got to the restorative justice aspects of it, did you feel supported by your community in your own healing journey?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. hmm Yeah, I
Can you
mean,
tell us just a little bit about what that support looked like, and also what steps you took to heal?
um, I just started looking uh, for healers essentially, and therapists, and ways to work on this. And in that process, I work with over like 2 dozen different healers and therapists in the last 4 years, which has actually been really wonderful for me. Um, there was an attempt for I had an accountability council, like, for the first, I don't know, 6 months or a year.
Yeah.
But at that time I was just kind of flailing around. I didn't really know what I needed, where to go with it. And that structure just didn't really, it just, yeah, it kind of fell apart. So I had, good wishes and friends who would talk with me and support me, but it wasn't like a community coming together. It was individual friends helping.
Mm.
So it wasn't really a community-based process, really.
This is the shame phrase on Damian, and you had mentioned earlier about feeling ashamed of your behavior. I want to share with you that when I was working with getting help from my husband, because there was no help for me. And by the way, that's changed. There is help for people regardless of gender out there if they commit domestic violence. And I'll post some resources at the bottom of this broadcast when I get off this conversation with you. But I remember that every time I perpetrated, I felt so ashamed and a lot of self-hatred, just so much self-hatred. And my husband would tell me, don't do that because it will cause you to re-perpetrate. And he would literally tell me to go do something nice and nurturing for myself, which was so counterintuitive. And here's a man that I'm harming, who's telling me this. This is like astounding, shocking. But I took his advice. I followed his mentoring, and I crawled out of my hole, and I changed my behavior forever through self-love. And I'm wondering, first, it's a two-part question. First of all, is that self-love also part of your healing journey? And two, do you think that people who perpetrate harm against other people are often suffering from low self-esteem or a form of self-hatred?
Yeah, absolutely. Like for me, I just had a lot of shame from my childhood that was unresolved. I just felt really kind of rejected by everyone and just kind of carried the sense that I would be rejected. And so I manifested the reality of that through, by being out of tune with people and occasionally doing things that, cross people's boundaries so that, and like to fulfill that self-imposed, future on myself.
Yeah.
And really the healing has come through active self-love. The course I'm leading on Tuesday, like my primary practice is that once an hour, I take 3 breaths into my heart and I feel my chest expand and contract, and I bring my awareness into my body and escape my mind, which has been all consuming for most of my life. And every time I do that, I'm giving myself a little hit of self-love. And from doing this for 3 years, like I'm so much more clear that I truly do love myself because I am loving myself. It's like, I've got a solid track record of, of doing this wonderful practice. And it really does, like it has been the most loving thing I can do for myself because it's given me direct access to joy. Like I feel joy pretty much all the time now, no matter what circumstances are happening. And so it has truly been like the greatest act of self-love. And also working with all the healers that I have has been just tremendously impactful. And one thing, like I don't know anyone else that's gone through the kind of regimen of this kind of healing that I have. And what I've discovered is that all of these different healing modalities, and I've worked with everything under the sun, from like classical Western psychotherapy to like shamanic healing and the sacred medicine rituals, like energy healing, Reiki, past life like regressions, all like I've been kind of like, oh, you're a healer, what do you got? Let's try it. And what I've discovered is that that the results are synergistic. That like this is the thing we haven't even tapped into yet, is that these healing modalities are even more effective when they're combined with other healers. And that like commitment to healing myself has really done the work. And I now, like I said, experience so much more self-love than ever used to. So,
And
yeah.
has that resulted in better boundaries, so you're being more respectful of other
Well,
people's boundaries?
and that's the thing, of course. Yeah, because like I've really like like, move back into my body. Like I'm so much more in tune with my body now than I used to be. And we're not telepathic like yet as humans, but we are telepathic. Like we can feel each other. We have like our empathy. Through our empathy, we can truly feel what another's feeling. I believe our hearts are connected on an energetic level that we don't directly perceive.
Yeah.
But we can only experience that if we're in our bodies, if we're connected with our bodies and our hearts. So like, and that's why, men especially perpetrate so much, is because we're in our heads so much. We're like not connected with our bodies. We don't feel the harm that we're causing to others because we can't feel our own hearts. And that disconnection is what allows perpetration to happen. If you truly felt the harm you were causing to another through these and the pain and suffering, people wouldn't be able to do it. But men just don't understand, because we're taught to like not feel and be invulnerable and not be vulnerable and not be sensitive. So we don't feel these things, and we don't understand how much it can hurt another person until we come back into our bodies and experience that.
And I'm
Mm,
so glad you're going to interview for my book. And I just want to make one little footnote to what you said. I think what you're
mhm,
saying absolutely applies to a lot of men. But for those survivors out there who may have encountered somebody who got off on their pain, I just
mhm.
want to say that there are different kinds of perpetrators on this planet, and
Oh
that's one
yeah.
thing when I think
Mhm,
about cancel culture. It's like we don't seem to be able to nuance this conversation. So when I see
mhm.
things like hair sniffing and a brutal rape equated with each other, I just want to scream. I'm like, these
The-
things are not the same.
yeah.
We need to talk about all of it.
Mhm,
But
mhm,
if we can start to develop a language around this so that we understand degrees of harm and also different types of perpetrators.
mhm.
Um, I was wondering, Damian, if you would be willing to lead us through that 3 breath thing. This is a gnarly, potentially triggering conversation that we're having here. You and I have some, our sea legs on the topic, as it were. But I'm just thinking that before we go, we may want to help our viewers go into a place of peace where they can connect with themselves, regardless of what they have done
Mhm,
or what has been done to them.
mhm. Yeah, thank you. So if you'd all like to just close, well, first of all, like put your fingers here in your sternum, like right above your heart
Like,
area. This is what
okay.
I like to do, is just kind of touch this
Oh,
spot.
like this. Okay, got
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. Just kind of touch this spot right here. And then close your eyes. And then just take 3 breaths and feel your chest expand and contract. That's it. Just locate your awareness in your body and come home to yourself. Mm, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Am I seeing snow in the background there?
No, it's just weird lighting.
Oh,
I'm in
okay.
Florida.
You're in Florida. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, one more time, tell our viewers where they can find your course and how they can participate in it.
Yeah. Can we post a link?
Oh, yes, absolutely. But
Um,
I'll do that when we in the Facebook Live. I'm going to put a whole bunch of resources below it.
yeah, I'd say for that, just ping me personally and private message me, and I'll let you know. I'll send you the details.
Okay.
So
So
I'm
Damian Jones.
Damian Jones, Damien, Jones on Facebook. Yeah,
No problem. And as soon as this broadcast ends, I'm going to go in and put all that info. So PM me with your link, okay?
will do. Wonderful.
All right. Thank you, Damian,
All
for your
right.
courage and also for joining us in the shame-free zone.
Thanks, Veronica. It's been a pleasure.
Same here.